The grenade is in his hand. He can feel the weight of it cold and deadly. In the pitch darkness of the Burmese jungle, Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung has maybe 2 seconds before it explodes. He throws it back toward the enemy. Another grenade lands. He throws it back. Then comes the third one. His fingers close around the metal. His arm pulls back. But this time, there's no time left. The world explodes in fire and pain. His right hand is gone. Blood streams down his face. He can't see out of one eye. His leg is shredded with shrapnel. He's alone in that foxhole, and somewhere out there in the black jungle night, 200 Japanese soldiers are advancing on his position, and they're not stopping. Most men would die right there. Most men would surrender. But Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung, 24 years old, 5 foot 3 inches tall, from a village so small most maps don't show it, reaches down with his left hand and picks up his rifle. What happens in the next 4 hours will become one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of human courage ever recorded. This is his story. May 12th, 1940. World War II is dying, but not dead. In Europe, the guns fell silent just days ago. Hitler put a bullet in his head in his Berlin bunker. The Germans surrendered. Americans and Russians are embracing at the Elbe River. Across America, families are celebrating, believing their boys will be coming home. But in the jungles of Burma, on the other side of the world, the war is as savage as it's ever been. The Japanese Empire is crumbling, but the Japanese soldier doesn't surrender. He fights to the death. And standing between them and what they want is a force that Americans fought alongside, but many never heard about. The Gurkhas of Nepal, warriors from the roof of the world, whose motto is as simple as it is absolute. Better to die than be a coward. To understand what happened that night requires understanding who these men are. In 1814, the British East India Company, which controlled much of India, decided to expand into the Himalayan kingdom of Nepal. They expected an easy victory. Instead, they ran into an army of mountain warriors who fought with a ferocity and skill that stunned the British commanders. The war dragged on for 2 brutal years. British soldiers began to respect and even fear these Nepali warriors who seemed to prefer death to retreat, who fought with curved knives called kukris that could take a man's head off with one swing, who appeared out of mountain mists like ghosts and fought like demons. When peace finally came in 1816, a British commander named Sir Ralph Lang said something remarkable. He said if he couldn't defeat these warriors, he would recruit them. And so began one of the most unusual military partnerships in history. Young men from the hills and mountains of Nepal began to join the British Army, forming their own regiments with their own traditions, their own weapons, their own battle cries. By World War II, there were 10 full regiments of Gurkhas, and they had fought on every continent where Britain fought. Rommel's Africa Corps faced them in the deserts of North Africa. The Germans faced them in the mountains of Italy. The Japanese faced them in the jungles of Malaya and Burma. And everywhere they went, the Gurkhas earned a reputation that went beyond ordinary courage. Think about what it meant to become a Gurkha. Boys from remote villages in Nepal, places where the nearest road might be a 3-day walk away, would hear stories from veterans who returned, stories of distant lands, of battles, of honor. When the recruiting teams came to Nepal, thousands would show up, but only the very best would be selected. Maybe 1 in 100. They tested your physical strength, your endurance, your character. If you made it, you became part of something bigger than yourself. You became part of a brotherhood that stretched back more than a century. A brotherhood with battle honors from Afghanistan to France, from India to Burma. The Gurkhas brought something special to warfare. It wasn't just that they were tough, though they were as tough as men come. It wasn't just that they were skilled soldiers, though their marksmanship and fieldcraft were legendary. It was something deeper. It was a sense of honor, of duty, that came from their culture and their beliefs. Many Gurkhas worshipped Mahakali, the Hindu goddess of power and time and destruction. Before battle, they would pray to her. Their war cry was Jai Mahakali, Ayo Gorkali, which means victory to Mahakali. The Gurkhas are upon you. To die in battle while doing your duty was not something to fear. It was, in a way, sacred. American soldiers who fought in the Pacific understood this kind of enemy determination from the other side. They had faced Japanese soldiers who followed the code of Bushido, who would rather die than surrender, who would charge machine gun positions knowing they would die. It created a kind of warfare that was more brutal, more final than anything seen in Europe. In Burma, in 1945, it was Bushido versus the Gurkha Code of Honor, and neither side gave an inch. Burma itself was hell on earth. The British called it the Forgotten War, because while the world watched the great invasions and battles in Europe, some of the most savage fighting of the entire war was happening in the jungles of Southeast Asia. The Japanese had conquered Burma in 1942, and for 3 years, British, Indian, American, and Gurkha forces fought to take it back. The jungle was thick enough to block out the sun. Diseases like malaria, dysentery, and typhus killed as many men as combat. The heat was suffocating. The rain during monsoon season was biblical. And everywhere, in every village, behind every tree, the Japanese waited. By May 1945, the British 14th Army, under General William Slim, had finally turned the tide. They had crossed the Irrawaddy River, one of the major geographical barriers in Burma, and they were pushing the Japanese back toward Rangoon. But the Japanese weren't running. Every position became a fortress. Every village had to be taken in close-quarters combat, where you cleared buildings room by room, where you never knew if that pile of vegetation was just vegetation or a sniper's nest. American Marines in the Pacific Islands would have recognized this kind of fighting instantly. Brutal, exhausting, merciless. The 4th Battalion of the 8th Gurkha Rifles, Lachhiman Gurung's unit, was operating near a village called Taungdaw on the west bank of the Irrawaddy. The 8th Gurkha Rifles had a distinguished history stretching back to 18. They had fought in Afghanistan, in the Indian Rebellion of 1857, in World War I. Their men came primarily from the Gurung people of western Nepal, from villages in the shadow of the Annapurna Mountains, places where the air is thin and life is hard, and men grow up tough. Lachhiman Gurung came from one of those villages. Born in 1970, he grew up in a world without electricity, without cars, without any of the modern conveniences that even poor Americans took for granted. His world was mountains and forests, subsistence farming, strong family ties, and the old traditions. When he was old enough, he traveled to the recruiting station, probably walking for days, hoping to be selected, and he made it. He joined the 8th Gurkha Rifles and became part of that long tradition of warriors. By May 1945, he was 24 years old, a rifleman in B Company. He had seen combat. He had faced the Japanese before. His officers knew he was reliable, steady, the kind of soldier you could count on when things got bad. On the night of May 12th, he was selected for one of the most dangerous jobs in infantry combat, manning a forward observation post. Think of it as a tripwire. You put a few men out ahead of your main defensive line, and if the enemy attacks, they're the first to see it, the first to fight, the first to die. If things go wrong, it's a job you give to soldiers you trust absolutely. Lachhiman and 2 other riflemen were sent to the furthest forward position of all, a foxhole dug into the jungle soil, the most exposed point in the entire defensive line. As darkness fell on May 12th, these 3 men settled in. They checked their rifles, their ammunition, their grenades. They ate cold rations because you don't light fires on the front line. And then they waited. The jungle at night is never silent. There are insects, birds, animals moving in the darkness. Every sound could be nothing, or it could be the enemy. Your eyes strain to see shapes in the blackness. Your finger stays near the trigger. Time moves differently out there. Minutes feel like hours. Sometime after midnight, in those darkest hours before dawn on May 3rd, the attack began. At first, just movement, sounds that weren't quite right, shadows that might have been men. Then more movement, a lot of movement. The 3 Gurkhas raised their rifles, and then they saw them. Japanese soldiers, lots of them, emerging from the jungle, advancing on their position. Intelligence would later estimate at least 200 soldiers in this assault. This wasn't a probe or a patrol. This was a full assault designed to break through the forward positions and hit the main defensive line while it was vulnerable. The 3 Gurkhas opened fire. The crack of Lee Enfield rifles split the night. Work the bolt. Chamber another round, aim, fire, work the bolt again. In the muzzle flashes, you could see them clearly now, Japanese soldiers advancing in the darkness. And there were so many of them. The 3 men fired as fast as they could operate their rifles. But the enemy kept coming, and then the grenades started landing. This is where everything changed. A grenade hits the ground near you, and you have maybe 3 seconds before it detonates. 3 seconds to find it in the darkness of the foxhole, 3 seconds to decide what to do. Most soldiers would try to take cover, press themselves against the dirt, and pray. But in a foxhole, there's nowhere to hide. The walls of the foxhole actually contain the blast, make it worse. Your only chance is to throw it back. And you have to be fast. And you have to be brave enough to grab a live grenade that could explode in your hand at any moment. The first grenade landed in the foxhole. Lachhiman Gurung grabbed it and threw it back. It exploded between them and the enemy. Then the second grenade came in. Again, his hand moved without hesitation. He found it, grabbed it, threw it back. Another explosion. His 2 comrades were fighting beside him, but the Japanese were getting closer, and more grenades were coming. And then the 3rd grenade landed, and Lachhiman's fingers closed around it, and he pulled his arm back to throw it. But the Japanese had learned. They had cut the fuse shorter. As his hand closed around that grenade, it detonated. The blast tore his right hand apart. The explosion blew off his fingers, shattered the bones of his hand and arm. Shrapnel ripped into his face, into his right eye, into his chest and his right leg. The concussion threw him back against the side of the foxhole. In an instant, he went from a healthy combat soldier to a man catastrophically wounded, half-blind, in unimaginable pain, with blood pouring from multiple wounds. His two comrades were hit in the same assault. One was killed instantly. The other was so badly wounded he couldn't fight. And Lachhiman Gurung, 24 years old from a village in the Himalayas, was alone in that foxhole. And the Japanese were still coming. This is the moment that separates heroes from ordinary men. This is the moment where a man finds out who he really is. Lachhiman Gurung had every reason to give up. He was critically wounded. He had lost his right hand. He could barely see. His comrades were dead or dying. He was alone, and 200 enemy soldiers were advancing on his position with the clear intention of killing him. By any reasonable standard, his war was over. He had done his duty. No one could ask for more. He could have tried to retreat, or surrendered, or simply waited for death. But Lachhiman Gurung was a Gurkha, and there's a reason that word means something. He reached down with his left hand, his only functioning hand, and he picked up his rifle. Now understand what this meant. The Lee Enfield rifle was designed for right-handed soldiers. The bolt that you work to eject the spent cartridge and chamber a new round is on the right side of the rifle. The way you're supposed to do it is hold the rifle with your left hand, aim it, fire it. Then use your right hand to work that bolt. You do it over and over in training until it becomes automatic, until you can do it without thinking. Lachhiman had to do it all with one hand. Hold the rifle, aim it, fire it, then somehow work that bolt to reload it, all with his left hand, all while wounded and half-blind and losing blood, all while the enemy was charging his position. The physical difficulty of this is hard to overstate. It's like trying to write with the wrong hand while someone is hitting you with a baseball bat. But he did it. As the Japanese soldiers rushed his foxhole, Lachhiman Gurung fired. He worked that bolt somehow, chambered another round, fired again, and he started shouting. He shouted the war cry of the Gurkhas, Jai Mahakali, Ayo Gorkali. Victory to Mahakali, the Gurkhas are upon you. But witnesses from nearby positions who survived the night reported that he also shouted something else, a challenge that echoed through the jungle, "Come and fight a Gurkha!" The Japanese came at him again and again. They had overwhelming numerical superiority. They had grenades. They had machine guns. They had warriors who had been taught that death was preferable to failure, men who would charge into certain death if their commander ordered it. But they could not break through. Every time they tried to advance on that foxhole, rifle fire cut them down. One man, wounded, one-handed, bleeding, was holding the line. 4 hours. 4 hours, Lachhiman Gurung fought alone in that foxhole. 4 hours is a lifetime in combat. 4 hours of continuous fighting, of working that rifle with one hand, of fearing into the darkness at an enemy that just kept coming. He must have been growing weaker as the blood drained from his body. The pain must have been beyond anything most people can imagine. His ammunition must have been running low. But he did not stop. He did not retreat. He kept firing, and he kept shouting his defiance into the night. Think about what was going through his mind during those 4 hours. Did he think about his village in Nepal, about his family? Did he think about his training, about the traditions of his regiment? Did he pray to Mahakali for strength, or did his mind narrow down to one simple thing, the next target, the next shot, the next moment of survival? Whatever he thought, whatever kept him going, it was enough. He held that position for 4 hours against an enemy force that should have overwhelmed him in 4 minutes. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the jungle canopy, the Japanese assault finally broke. They had been trying for 4 hours to take this one position, and they had failed. Their attack had stalled. They began to pull back into the jungle, leaving their dead behind. The position had held by one wounded man who refused to die. When reinforcements finally fought their way forward to the observation post as the sun came up, they found a scene that seemed impossible. Lachhiman Gurung was still alive, still at his post, sitting in that foxhole surrounded by spent shell casings. His rifle was beside him. His dead comrades lay nearby, and in front of the foxhole, spread across the ground in a rough semicircle, were bodies. Japanese bodies. The officers counted them. 31 dead Japanese soldiers laid directly in front of Lachhiman's position, killed by his rifle. In the wider area of the assault, there were 87 enemy dead in total. One man, catastrophically wounded, fighting with one hand, had killed at least 31 enemy soldiers and single-handedly stopped an attack by 200. The officers who saw it could barely believe it. Some of them had fought through the entire war and had never seen anything like it. Lachhiman was quickly evacuated for medical treatment. He survived, though he lost his right hand permanently and his vision was damaged. The position he had defended so desperately was held for another 3 days and 2 nights of intermittent Japanese attacks before the sector was finally secured. But the breakthrough the Japanese needed, the breakthrough that might have changed the tactical situation, never happened, because one man refused to give up his post. 7 months later, on December 19th, 1940, the war was over, and Lachhiman Gurung stood in the Red Fort in Delhi. Lord Louis Mountbatten, who had been the supreme Allied commander of Southeast Asia, was there to present him with a medal. Not just any medal, the Victoria Cross. It's the highest military decoration that Britain and the Commonwealth nations award. Since Queen Victoria instituted it in 1856, fewer than 1,500 have ever been given out. It's awarded only for the most conspicuous bravery, for valor in the face of the enemy that goes beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. Many Victoria Crosses are awarded posthumously because the men who earned them didn't survive the action that earned them the medal. But Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung stood there alive to receive his, and when the station was read out, describing what he had done that night in Burma, there were hardened soldiers in that audience with tears in their eyes. The citation told how he threw back 2 grenades, how the third destroyed his hand, how he refused to abandon his post, how he fought alone for 4 hours with one hand and stopped an attack by 200 enemy soldiers. It told the story, but words on paper can't really capture what it must have been like to be in that foxhole on that night, to make the choice he made, to find the strength he found. Lachhiman was the 4th member of the 8th Gurkha Rifles to receive the Victoria Cross. But even among Victoria Cross actions, few match the sheer physical impossibility of what he did. To fight for 4 hours with one hand while critically wounded against overwhelming odds, and to win, it defies logic. It defies everything we think we know about human limitations. After the war, Lachhiman Gurung went home to Nepal. He lived a quiet life, honored as a hero by his people, but not seeking fame or attention. The Gurkhas as a whole have always been like that, more interested in doing their duty than in glory. He lived to be 92 years old, passing away in December 2010. And throughout his long life, the story of what he did on May 13th night was told and retold, an inspiration to every Gurkha soldier who came after him, a standard of courage that seems almost superhuman. The story of Lachhiman Gurung matters for a lot of reasons. It matters because it's true. Every detail has been verified and documented. It matters because it shows us what human beings are capable of when they're tested to the absolute limit. Most of us will never face a test like that, and we should be grateful we won't. But knowing that men like Lachhiman Gurung existed, knowing that when he faced that test he didn't break, tells us something important about the human spirit. It matters because it reminds us that courage isn't about being unafraid. Lachhiman Gurung must have been terrified in that foxhole, but courage is doing your duty even when you're afraid, even when it would be easier to give up, even when no one would blame you if you did. It matters because it shows us that size doesn't determine strength, that a man 5'3" can be a giant. It matters because it demonstrates that loyalty to your comrades, to your mission, to your honor, can be stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. The British and American soldiers who fought in World War II came from different countries and different cultures, but they understood each other on a fundamental level. They understood duty. They understood that freedom isn't free, that sometimes good men have to go to terrible places and do terrible things to stop evil from winning. The men who stormed Omaha Beach, who fought in the Ardennes, who island hopped across the Pacific, who flew bombers over Germany, they would have recognized Lachhiman Gurung as one of their own, a warrior who did what warriors do. Today, we live in a world that those men helped create. The world isn't perfect, but it's better than it would have been if the Axis powers had won. And it's better because of millions of men and women who served, who sacrificed, who did their duty. Most of them came home and never talked much about what they went through. They got jobs, raised families, became the people we called the greatest generation. A few of them, like Lachhiman Gurung, did things so extraordinary that their stories must be told, not to glorify war. War is hell and should be avoided when possible, but to honor courage, to remember sacrifice, to keep alive the example of what humans can achieve when they refuse to surrender. In the hills of Nepal, in the villages where the Gurkhas come from, the story of Lachhiman Gurung is still told to young men. It's told as an example of what it means to be a Gurkha, what it means to live by the motto, better to die than be a coward. But the story belongs to more than just the Gurkhas. It belongs to everyone who believes that courage matters, that honor matters, that there are things worth fighting for even when the cost is high. Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung, holder of the Victoria Cross, defender of his post, warrior of the 8th Gurkha Rifles. His story is one for the ages. In a war filled with millions of acts of courage, his stands out. One man, one foxhole, one night of impossible courage. That's the story. That's what he did. And that's why, 80 years later, we still remember his name.